Hey everybody, Legal Vices here, bringing you a recap, a summary of day 9 of the Karen Reed murder trial. It was an interesting day, much like every other interesting day in this trial, but this was a day where not much happened, but also a lot of subtle things happened. And let's get into that right now. Off the day was Julie Albert taking the stand again. We last saw her at the end of last week, where she was in the middle of her cross examination by the defense lawyers when, just in the middle of a line of questioning, the judge just shut the thing down. It was surprising to me, and I checked out a few other reviewers, and across the board, everybody was surprised. The judge just, in the middle of a cross examination, in the middle of an important line of questioning, just shuts it down. This she seems to do that a lot, and we see it occur at breaks and things. When she'll just cut off the defense in the middle of their cross examination and go take an hour lunch, call it a day, go to a break. It's it's a little disturbing, but anyway, let's get in with the meat and potatoes of the day, shall we? The cross examination continues. She said that she rarely talks to Trooper Proctor's sister, Courtney, on the phone. But apparently, she's logged 67 phone calls in 7 months after John O'Keefe's death. That comes out to about 2 a week. And two calls a week doesn't sound like rarely talking to someone. It sounds like talking to them a couple times a week. She says she doesn't recall the contents of any of the 67 phone calls. This has been a problem with a lot of the prosecution's witnesses, especially with the Albert clan. They seem to have these pretty impressive memory lapses during cross-examination, but then they remember a lot of stuff on direct or redirect. So it's a very curious case of amnesia when they undergo cross-examination. She said that she talked to Proctor's sister on the day that Karen Reed was arrested for 12 minutes. But she doesn't remember if she talked to the lead investigator's sister about Karen. So on the day that Karen is arrested for the murder of John O'Keefe, she talked to Proctor's sister, Courtney, for 12 minutes. No idea if they even mentioned the fact that Karen Reed had been arrested. 3 phone calls with Proctor's sister, Courtney, on the morning of Karen's arraignment, before the arraignment. Talked to her 3 times, February 2nd. And spoke to Courtney again shortly after the arraignment later that morning. But again, in those 4 phone calls, she doesn't remember whether or not they talked about Karen Reed's arraignment. So someone she talks to very rarely on the phone, she talks to 3 times before the arraignment, 1 time after the arraignment, doesn't know if they talked about the arraignment. She doesn't remember if she ever told Proctor's sister, Courtney, that she was a witness in the case. She was interviewed by Trooper Proctor about 2 weeks after the death, but doesn't remember whether or not she told his sister that she was nervous about being questioned. Well, Trooper Proctor and Trooper Buchanan. All right, I'm laughing because I know probably a lot of you have seen it. Yeah, she was sitting in her home, and Trooper Proctor and the guy he was with, Trooper Buchanan, came to the house and interviewed her. Now, the big question is, who was that again? Who did she say came and visited her and questioned her? This sort of this took me a little bit off guard, and then I did my research and I found out that seems like everybody else on the internet had fun with this as well. Let's see what she testified to regarding Trooper Buchanan, shall we?
You were interviewed at 5:30 p.m. on February 10th, correct?
Correct.
Where did that interview take place?
At my home in Canton.
Who was present for that interview?
Me, my husband, Trooper Proctor, and Trooper Bukaki.
I was not ready for that. I'm looking through things. I'm listening. I'm taking notes for this summary, and then it was one of these. Wait, what? what did I just hear her say? And then you go back and what I think is almost as funny as her actually saying what she's what she said. And oh boy, that that was a little bit of a Freudian slip of some sort. That was bizarre. But what I thought was almost equally as funny was this extended pause after her answer. I'm wondering what's going through defense counsel's head after she says what she said. But just listen to this extensive pause when she gives her answer. It's almost like you can just hear the squirrels in the defense lawyer's head, like trying to process this, trying not to laugh, trying to get through it, and trying to regroup for the next question.
Bukaki.
Michael Proctor.
That's a very long pause between the questions, but we got through that little part of the day, which was actually really funny. I promptly sent it around to people and got the answer. Yeah, we've seen this on everybody else's channel already. But I missed the good chance. All the cool stuff happens on the days that I don't cover it live. Anyway, let's continue on with Trooper Buchanan and Trooper Proctor over at the house. She was in the room. Her husband was in the room while she was being questioned by Trooper Proctor and Trooper Buchanan. She doesn't remember doing nothing with nobody. Nothing with nobody. She doesn't remember calling Trooper Proctor later in the afternoon. Yeah, she called Trooper Proctor later in the afternoon, but doesn't remember it for 5 seconds. And then he called her back and they talked for 4 minutes. She said she's had his personal number for several years. She's very good friends with Courtney Proctor, the sister, but not best friends. They do a lot of things together. But she also testified that Karen and John had a good relationship. They had a great relationship, in fact. They said they were at the bar that night. They were happy and bubbly. There was no fighting that she saw in the brief time she was there before she had to leave because the music was giving her a migraine. Now, one subject that's sort of been the chief focus of the prosecution, of the defense, has been her son, Colin. Colin wasn't listed amongst the people that were at the house in the police report. He's sort of been an enigma here. She said that Colin arrived home at about 12:10 a.m. At exactly the same time her husband said Colin got home. But her husband couldn't have known that Colin got home at 12:10 because he was in the bar until 12:13 a.m. We questioned her about whether she had coordinated her answers with her husband, and she, of course, denied doing that. Again, they showed her the video of her husband still in the bar at 12:13. Takes 7 minutes to get home. The very earliest he could possibly have been home would be around 12:20. Well, they went to Brian's house the next morning, and when they got there, there was no police tape, no tents, no pieces of taillight, nothing to indicate that a crime scene had even existed. And this was fairly early in the morning when they got there. She doesn't remember avoiding any calls from the state police on April 1st, 2024. So this was at the March. It's a couple of months after, well, a little month or so after. She doesn't remember getting several phone calls. She met with the police later, and she looked through her phone contacts with Trooper Proctor, and then Trooper Proctor gave her phone back. And Karen said Karen didn't appear drunk on the night of the incident. There was no tension again or her arguing with John. But then redirect came around, and on redirect there was nothing special, and they let her off the stand after a few sort of unimportant, not really powerful questions. Well, then the trial took an interesting turn. It got interrupted for a little mini trial, a motion hearing. Many of you may be familiar with the journalist Turtleboy. He's essentially the person who's been responsible for bringing Karen Reid's story to the public's attention. He's been charged with witness intimidation. But he's also a journalist, columnist, reporter, whatever you want to call media personality, who has proper credentials to be at that hearing, at the trial. So he's been trying to get into court, but there's another journalist guy that's been harassing Turtleboy and doing everything that he can to prevent him from getting into the trial. Well, Turtleboy was in court all morning long, and then suddenly a motion was filed that Turtleboy should be kicked out of the court because he has a stay-away protection order in relation to some of the witnesses. Well, his lawyer apparently got this motion about 15 minutes before the hearing was scheduled. He hadn't even had time to read the motion by the time the hearing had started. Well, his lawyer did a pretty darn good job of arguing in favor of him, especially without being familiar with the facts and without being familiar with even the contents of the motion to get him expelled from the hearings. And he argued what I thought was very, very persuasive. His client has a fundamental First Amendment right as a member of the press to attend, and the courts in that have heard other motions and things in relation to this trial have found that the protection order doesn't extend to him attending trial as a witness or as a journalist. So the prosecution argues, but the witnesses are going to be intimidated if he's there. In fact, he's been charged with witness intimidation. So if he's there and the people that he's allegedly facing charges for allegedly intimidating are going to be there on the witness stand, they're not going to be comfortable. Turtleboy's lawyer said, so what? It's the First Amendment is very, very powerful, and feelings don't get mentioned in the First Amendment. But in the end, the judge ruled that Turtleboy would be prohibited from the court while certain witnesses testified. But other than that, he could be in court while other witnesses were testifying. After that got resolved, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, the homeowner's wife, took the stand. She testified under direct examination that she knows ATF agent Higgins. She went to the bar to hang out with her sister and daughter and her daughter's boyfriend. John O'Keefe was wearing a hat, sweatshirt, and sneakers. And Higgins left. This is important to bear in mind. She said that Higgins left the house first at 1:30. Jennifer and her daughter Jennifer and Matt, who are Brian's friends, left about 1:45 to 1:50 a.m. So Higgins left first at 1:30, 1:45, 1:50. Jennifer and Matt, Brian's friends, leave, and their daughter Caitlin moved. She left about 2 a.m. Nothing unusual outside the house. It was a nice night. There was nothing outside, nothing out of the ordinary inside the house. And the sister came rushing into their bedroom at 6:30 a.m. They were asleep, hadn't heard, seen nothing. They were dead asleep. And then her sister came crashing into the room. She was hysterical. They couldn't make heads or tails out of what she was saying. So they went downstairs. And while the Mrs. Albert was walking downstairs, she saw that Officer Lank was already walking through her door. He was alone. She testified that Officer Lank walked into her house alone. That contradicts what Officer Sean Good said a few days ago. He said that he walked into the house together with Officer Lank. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the testimony there. And then she said she looked out the door out the window and she saw there was maybe 2 cruisers. She didn't think a fire truck was there. She doesn't remember any ambulances. They talked for about 45 minutes, but then she sort of recalled that maybe another officer did come in a little bit later, which would have been Officer Good. Well, Higgins came to the house around 8 a.m. again, and then she testified that they quickly sold their house because they wanted to downsize. She said that they had planned to move around the end of 2021, and it just seemed like a good time now to do so. And then on cross-examination, it was a little bit more intense, a little bit more in depth. She testified that she saw the little horseplay in the bar, the fake fighting, as the prosecution called it. She said it's unusual for him to be fooling around like that. She denied that her husband is, he said, absolutely not a highly trained fighter. But then the defense lawyer got her to admit that he has boxing experience. He has military training from the Marine Corps. He has his hand-to-hand fighting combat training from his police training. And then they showed a video of the outside of the bar with people leaving. And they showed a person in the video that was clearly her. Absolutely no question it was her. But she said she couldn't be sure that was her. She couldn't be sure. It was very, very disingenuous and very, very weird to watch. I just to her looking at a picture. I knew it was her, and it was like from the nose up. And I knew it was her, but she didn't recognize herself. It could be her. She just couldn't tell for sure. And then after a bit longer, she saw the clothes and went, aha, I guess that is me. It was weird. But then earlier, she testified about vehicles at her house. If you may remember, there was a question about a Ford Edge, a black Ford Edge that was seen parked right in front of where the body was found, right about the time the body should have been there. Well, earlier she testified about the family keeping around like 4 vehicles around the house. She mentioned that there was a Cadillac, a Ford Explorer, and a Ford Escape, but not what the 4th vehicle was. The defense got her to admit that her husband's work car is a black Ford Edge. Perhaps the mysterious black Ford Edge that was parked in front of where the body was found, that they never followed up on, that they never checked out or investigated. Well, she didn't state it earlier, but she said it then. She said that Higgins drove the Ford Edge and may possibly have parked it there before he left. Well, then she testified that as soon as she got home from the bar, she saw Colin, her son Colin, waiting to go home. She didn't see him leave. I'm sorry, it was I had a brain freeze there for a second. It was Julie Albert's son, not hers. So she saw Colin, Julie Albert's son, just waiting to go home, said his ride was almost there, didn't see him leave. Said they talked about the German Shepherd. They finally brought up the dog. She refused to admit that the German Shepherd was not good around strangers. But she said he was fine with strangers, but he didn't like other dogs. Then they got her to admit that he had a previous bite history with other dogs, and looked very, very annoyed when the defense lawyer asked her if she also had a bite history with humans. It seems that she admitted that 2 other people had been bitten by her and taken to the hospital. Brian let Chloe, the dog, out as soon as he got home that night. As soon as he came home from the bar, he let Chloe outside. And suddenly, very, very, not too very long after all of this, they got rid of Chloe, their pet of 6 years, just a couple of months later. But she refused to say that they got rid of the dog. What she said was, I did not get rid of my dog. I rehomed my dog. The dog is somewhere in Vermont, she said. And then she said she didn't hear any screaming or yelling outside of the house early in the morning. She didn't know where Brian and ATF officer Higgins were or what they were doing when she got home from the bar. She had no idea that John wanted to come over or didn't want to come over. And she was doing a little cleaning work. They left her view, Brian and Higgins. Brian and ATF officer Higgins left her view and went somewhere for a while. She has no idea where they were or whatever they were doing. Now, she was shown a statement that she gave to Sergeant Lank at the time, sorry. This is where the timeline is different. Remember, she said that let me scroll back up here. I don't want to ruin the timeline because we said it was an important timeline. It was the order that people left the house. Her daughter was the last person to leave the house. Higgins left first at 1:30. Jennifer and Matt, Brian's friends, left at 1:45, 1:50. So Higgins, the friends, and then the daughter were the last people to leave. Well, the statement was a little bit different. Uh, shortly after the accident, when she talked to Lank, she told him that her daughter left first at 12:15, not last at around 2 a.m., which she'd testified to earlier. Her explanation was it was confusing at the time, but she's always maintained that her daughter left the house first, so she must have said something confusing or he must have written it down wrong, but it was just all confusing. It was hectic. And she testified that she told Trooper Proctor, who was at the house that night, but she didn't mention that her son Colin was there when she got home. She also didn't mention that Colin was there when she was investigated by Sergeant Lank. So talking to Proctor and talking to Lank, she never mentioned that her son Colin was in the house. Although she said that he was there waiting for his ride when she arrived. Well, they woke up between 6 and 6:30 but also, let's say that, but she said that she didn't talk to anybody. The first thing they knew, they were asleep, and then her sister came, crashed through the door, woke them up, and they didn't see any flashing lights from 6 to 6:30 because the blinds were shut and the curtains were drawn. But at some point between 6 and 6:30, for a certain number of seconds each time, there were phone calls. There were phone calls to her house, but she said she never answered any of them. But yet it said, 5 seconds or 7 seconds or whatever the time was. But she said she didn't hear anything and never answered any phone calls. From her sister, said, I never spoke to my sister. My husband was the only other person in the room and we were asleep. They're the only people that could answer the phone. But no, just magically and mysteriously, there was several phone calls for a certain period, a certain amount of time each, but no, they never didn't answer any phones. Couldn't explain that. They didn't go outside because they were sound asleep. That was the big question. With all this excitement going around, you didn't go outside? They were asleep till 6:30. Didn't hear anything. Didn't hear Karen Reed screaming hysterically. Didn't hear all the commotion with the fire trucks and the officers and the EMTs and things. Didn't hear any of that. Then they talked a little bit more on redirect. They rehomed Chloe the dog because of the other two people, not because of this incident. And the phone calls didn't wake her up, and she didn't answer any calls. She reiterated that. Then on recross, she provided information on the dogs. She said that she had provided the location of the dog to the prosecution. The defense seemed very surprised by that because that was one of the big pre-trial issues was we need information where that dog is. We'd like to see that dog. And they never got it. So the defense, when she said that she told the prosecution about the location of the dog, the defense's response was, "Oh, you have told the prosecution that?" And then there was an instant sidebar, and she was done testifying. No idea what happened at that sidebar. The final witness of the day was Brian Albert, the man, the homeowner, the guy who owned the house, the cop who owned the house where the other cop's body was found. They showed the bar videos again. I'm so sick of seeing those bar videos. I've seen enough bar videos to last a lifetime. Everyone was having a good time at the house. Everybody was having a great time at the bar. He and Higgins, she explained, went to his son's room to look at pictures of his son in the Marines, some of his son's Marine Corps pictures. Then he clarified that Higgins was the first to leave around 12:15. He said John O'Keefe and Karen Reed never entered his house. Never entered the house, wasn't there. And then he went to sleep sometime after 2 a.m. And he was awakened when his sister-in-law burst into the room between 6 and 6:30. She was almost hysterical. She said, John is dead, he uttered in court, but that was objected to and sustained. Boy, here we are, so far removed from the Darrell Brooks trial, and me making fun of Darrell Brooks saying sustained has now worked its way into my vocabulary. I'm ashamed. So, she just blurted out, she said John is dead. That was objected to and sustained. She didn't know who she was referring to. Apparently, she said that the police were downstairs and wanted to talk to them. Officer Lank was already in the house when he came down. Lank was by himself. And another officer came later. Can't remember who it was. That would be Officer Sean Good. They left after 10 or 20 minutes, and then they came back again later. And also Officer Gallagher came back later. He of the solo cups and leaf blower. And he called Higgins. This is Brian Adams. Brian Adams. I'm doing great today, aren't I? Brian Albert called ATF agent Lank because he thought it was important for him to know that this had happened. Everybody was shocked when they heard the news, but before he came down, he said he looked out the window and saw some emergency vehicles. He never went out to where the body was supposed to have been. Like after everybody cleared away, he said he never went to the spot where this body on his front lawn was supposed to have been found because he didn't think there was a need to do so, and he didn't want to interfere with the investigation. And he testified that they first discussed moving in October 2021. And after a little bit more it was pretty repetitive and non-important testimony, they ended the court for the day. So when it picks up on Monday for day 10, they will begin with the cross-examination of Brian Albert. All right, so check out day 10 for an ongoing review, which will hopefully be a little better put together. I got thrown off my game by Officer Buchanan. Cough, cough, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Anyway, this is me, Legal Vices. Thank you for joining me for a day 9 update of the Karen Reed murder trial.